Now to the United States, where Donald Trump has announced that he will freeze migration from what he called third world countries. Officials will now review the permanent residency status of people from more than a dozen countries and freeze immigration requests from Afghan nationals. An Afghan man has been arrested in connection with Wednesday's fatal shooting of a US National Guard member near the White House. The second member of the National Guard, who was also shot, remains in hospital with life-threatening injuries. Officials say the suspect was part of a CIA-backed unit in Afghanistan and entered America under a resettlement program in 2021. Well, Professor Michael Semple has served as Deputy EU Special Representative in Afghanistan. He's now Practitioner Chair at Queen's University Belfast's Institute for Global Peace, Security and Justice. Welcome to DW, Professor. Can we start with your reaction to that US decision to halt the processing of all Afghan immigration requests?
Well, I mean, I would start from the shooting itself. I mean, the shooting itself was a tragedy. It was a tragedy waiting to happen. And the freezing of the immigration applications is a predictable consequence of that. I mean, clearly there's, something very badly went wrong for allowing this 29-year-old Afghan to carry out the shooting. But huge numbers of Afghans are now going to be affected by the freezing of immigration processes.
Why do you say that the shooting of a US National Guard soldier in Washington was an accident, a tragedy waiting to happen?
I know large numbers of Afghans who have integrated extremely well both into Europe and into the United States after being given refuge there after the collapse of the Republic. However, some of the people who were brought into these programs are extremely dangerous. And what we've heard so far about this young man, Ramanullah Lakanwal, is that he was a member of a CIA-trained and mentored intelligence paramilitary force, which essentially, I mean, to put it brutally, these were death squads. The people who manned those squads were trained to kill. They carried that out extremely effective, and they were flown to the United States with all their skills. Now, some of them, of course, will no doubt have also been integrated well into the United States, but they're the ones who had every skill that you could imagine for carrying out an attack like this.
So was the Biden administration wrong, therefore, to bring them into the country, having presumably promised them that they would look after them for helping the United States in its mission in Afghanistan? There's a lot going on in there.
Absolutely, and look, dealing with the consequences of the disastrously managed Western exit from Afghanistan was supremely challenging for whichever administration was in charge there. But I think this idea of sort of a one-size-fits-all for Afghans being flown into the United States is playing out as a great mistake. Now, the particular challenge for members of CIA or other agency-mentored death squads was that they, precisely because they had been involved in the hardest end of the war, they also had a great deal to fear from the Taliban and those who said that, look, we fought alongside you while you were here. You have to look after us. Sure, they've got a point, but the idea that they could be sort of handled in the same way as, say, somebody who was a civilian member of embassy staff just doesn't make sense to me. Some kind of special program to keep an eye on these people, perhaps even relocate them in another location, like a foreign legion. Obviously, they needed to be taken care of. They needed to be looked after. Instead, this guy was free to apply his skills as he has done so tragically in DC.
That's a fascinating analysis, and we thank you for it, Professor. Professor Michael Semple from Queen's University Belfast.
I'd like to talk to Mahsa Khanbabai. She's an immigration lawyer in the United States. Mahsa, first up, I'd like to get your reaction to Donald Trump's announcement there.
Unfortunately, it's deplorable to see this tragedy being used to scapegoat all immigrants. It's an continuation of the weaponization of our immigration policy to target immigrants, and it's an abuse of discretion entrusted to the president and the executive branch. And instead of punishing a community as a whole, we should seek to put the perpetrator into a legal court process.
What does this move mean for people from the affected countries seeking to migrate to the U.S. and those already living in the country?
Yeah, and in fact, this is really a de facto ban because of a person's country of birth, and we can expect to see additional delays in with what we're already seeing. We could see impacted green card applications, asylum applications, humanitarian parole, any type of application where discretionary factors may be considered. And this could potentially impact millions of pending cases and millions of cases that have already been approved. We don't expect this to impact citizenship applications, but there are other policy changes that could potentially impact nationals from countries that the U.S. is at foreign policy odds with. And really, it's a dangerous move away from the principle of law and rules. They matter, and it's critical for a healthy, functioning society. And what the Trump administration is doing is essentially throwing out the rule book and making things up along the way.
Previous bans issued by the Trump administration were challenged in the courts and in Congress. Do you expect similar challenges this time around?
I do. And I think that we will continue to see significant wins at the district court and federal court levels, because essentially what we're doing is unmasking the unlawful national origin attacks against immigrants under the guise of national security. These policy changes and proclamations are too vague to pass muster in the courts, and they're purposely being kept vague because essentially the administration is using them as a sword against countries to try to extract something from them, like a mafia regime would do. Whether it's take deportees from our country, or we'll add you to the travel ban list, or we're going to impose sanctions or extract natural resources from you. It's really meant to instill fear in the U.S. and outside and dehumanizes immigrants. And I think that the courts will see through this.
You, of course, observe immigration policy evolution closely, have done so for a long time. What changes have you observed since Donald Trump returned to office?
Yeah, there have really been significant changes, whether it's the significant increase in delays in adjudications, whether it's the tactics of trying to limit immigration in terms of applications for work visas, to green cards, to individuals not even having their right to have a hearing in front of an immigration judge and being detained in for-profit prisons throughout the United States. We are seeing problems at U.S. embassies worldwide, not only because of delays at the embassies in terms of scheduling interviews, but once interviews have been scheduled, then individuals are waiting for months, if not years, for their visa applications and their green card applications to be adjudicated. So I'm expecting that we're going to continue to see significant changes and delays and targets on individuals based on their country of nationality or religion.
As immigration lawyer Mahsa Khanbabai, thank you so much for your time. Great speaking to you today.
Thank you very much for having me.